Well, actually, I have a short surprise. I have two presentations for you. The first one is going on now, and it starts in a second, and it is showing my personal journey through planning. People have asked me, why did you put all those pictures in the book? It's not very common. And they are pictures by a photographer, Petra, she is there, and they tell everything about planning. So this slide, you see that planning is a really hard job. And it can be a very lonely job, because you have to integrate a lot of things, and here you see that the goal of planning, well, you can decide this is the goal, but meanwhile you might find a lot of other possibilities to go, so it's a very difficult job. And sometimes you have to act as if you are blind, because there is so much happening, and still you have to plan and take care to survive. And this one is about the result of planning. So it can be that you make a plan and you end up with, well, some kind of crazy thing. So the result can be very unexpected, and sometimes planning is about, well, painting the clouds blue, and that's what you see here. So this is what I wanted to tell you in advance as an answer to the question, why all those pictures, why not Aristotle or some planning guru or whatever. So this is why I took those pictures. Can we now change to the visual presentation? Okay, so the title of my thesis and presentation is Innovative Land Use and Green Planning in Relation to Complexity Theory. I have two supervisors. They are sitting there on the first row. I can see them, they cannot see me today. Professor Rafael Crescente and Professor Urbano Fra. Yes. You have to check. Sorry. This one. Sorry, so the first slide is about the structure of the presentation. I will take you on a short personal journey through planning and complexity to explain why I came to this whole research. So it's a kind of personal journey, and well, you'll see that. Then I will talk shortly about question methods. Then I will go through 4 case studies. Most of them I did together with the people from the University of Santiago de Compostela, from the lab. And finally I will come to conclusion and discussion. So the personal journey through planning and complexity. Yeah, and I have been fascinated by this topic. Sometimes I didn't know, and especially when I was very young, I didn't know about that already for a long time. Especially in my professional career, I found out that planning is a very hard job, because you have to try to convince a lot of people to integrate a lot of different societal aspects in a plan for the long term on some kind of area, for example. And when I just came from university and had my first job, I found out that those planners and my colleague planners, they were really arguing a lot. And I didn't like that so much, because I had been a student, and as a student you don't argue, you just do. And you have fun, and you try to, well, you are there with other students, and more or less you always have the same ideas. And I found out that there were 2 aspects, or 2 ways to convince a planner. One is to come into a huge discussion, which might take a lot of time and a lot of years sometimes. And because I didn't have too much time, I found out that if you bring in a new idea about sustainability or about planning, some kind of innovation, and you do that at the right moment, in the right way, with the right person, you can change everything in 1 minute. And this was something, well, in my professional career, that I really thought about what's this, because of course I had lectures in planning at the university, and they never told me this. The most lectures and the most presentations by teachers, they were about, okay, if you want to plan, you have to set yourself a goal, you have to see what the problems are, you have to set yourself a budget and go for a direction, and step by step within a certain period you achieve your goal. And I found out, well, sometimes you just do nothing and wait for the right moment and change everything, and that's it. Well, when I look back, well, the first moment I was thinking about complexity, I realized later it was at high school when I was 14 years old. It was my first lesson in chemistry. And a teacher, I still remember this, the teacher came in with 2 glasses of transparent liquid. And she asked, okay, what do you think? And we were all there, 14-year-old kids. What do you think when I put this, what happens when I put this together? And there was one very smart guy, he said, well, it will be double the amount. But that was not the right, it was a good answer, but not the right answer. And she did it, so she put the things together, and suddenly, in one split second, the liquid became transparent. Well, that's a miracle. If you put 2, became pink, excuse me. And it was a miracle, because we had 2 liquids, transparent, you put them together, and suddenly they are pink. So that was one crazy thing. The other thing was that you expect, when something turns into pink, that it turns from transparent to a little bit pink, a little bit more pink, even a little bit more, and finally it's pink. But that is not what happened. It just changed in one split second. And you see the graph explaining. Where's my button? This rapid change is because of the transition from acid to base of liquids. And at the moment I didn't know about complexity, but it is one of the things that I always remembered from school, and maybe one of the most important lessons, although I didn't realize at that moment. There's another thing happening to me, well, I always call it the unknown girl. And it was when I went from the high school to university, I went to Amsterdam to have a room, and I went to the student housing department. I was a bit nervous then, and I came into the building and there was a huge row. It was a 1.5 hour row. So I had to stand at the back, and so after 1.5 hours I was there at the desk, and the guy asked me, okay, so you want to have a room? And I said, yes, please. And he said, well, where do you want to live? Well, maybe in the center of Amsterdam, please. Just in the middle, so in the canal area if possible. And of course everyone said that, but the guy said, well, sorry for you, but there are 4 opportunities. One is the north, we have the east, we have the south, and there is the west, so what do you want? And then, well, I didn't know, I had no idea. So I was standing there like what to do, and then a girl came to me from the other row and said, well, you should take the north. I said, okay, please, can I have a room in the north? And of course it looks like a minor decision, and maybe it was, but the interesting thing is that in the north I met many, many friends, and most people I know now, most friends are still reliable to this choice. And sometimes I even think maybe if I had gone to the south, I would have been a pilot on an aircraft or whatever, so it could have been completely different pathway for me to go. And the interesting thing is also for me that when people ask me, when people think that when I tell this that now I have been married with this girl for 25 or 30 years, having 3 kids and so on and so on, so they asked me for that. I said, well, sorry, I never met her again. And the thing is that someone comes in and says, well, you should do this, and you do it, and it's a major decision. Well, you never know because you don't know the other pathway, but you can think about that like this was a major decision. And why do I tell this? Because we are learned, people learn us, people teach us. If you make a decision, you should know everything. You should try to, well, so I should go to the north, the west, the east and the south to find out which students are there, is there a good bar, how is the public transport, what's the price, and all those things, and you cannot do that. So sometimes you really have to make a decision in a split second, which turns out to be very, very important for the rest of your life. Then the last event I want to mention was, it was a conference in Siena, and it was a conference on sustainable cities, and there were there scientists and people out of practice. And I was told there was a certain guy called Prigogine who was coming there to talk. And Prigogine had a Nobel Prize in chemistry or thermodynamics, and he was very good in complexity and complex systems. So there was someone explaining that in life we have, well, in the world we have a lot of systems, we have complex systems, and complex systems are not easy to understand, but they do something special. They are there and they are in some kind of equilibrium for a long time in a stable situation, but somehow pressure around them builds up because energy is coming in or information or other things, and then this system, well, it's not in balance anymore, and then it's not the case that it slightly is changing to another system, but it tries to resist the pressure until the pressure is too big, and sometimes it never is too big, but when it's too big it can suddenly change from one situation into a completely different situation, and it's very hard to find out in a linear, in a rational way why this happened and what happens exactly. And then I thought, this is exactly what I've been doing in my professional career in Breda, when I was waiting for the right moment to say the right thing in a certain project group to some people, and then everything changed. And so somehow there is some kind of connection between these different things. There's also this unknown girl, she was there. I mean, if now someone would come to me and say, you should go to live there, I should say, okay, so what? I'm not going to do that. But at that moment, I had to make a decision. I didn't know anything. I was in a crisis, like, what can I do? Somebody comes and say, you make that decision, please, and I did that. So this theory by Prigogine about complex systems was, and it's about 10 years ago, I really thought this is very interesting for me to further investigate what's going on. So my fascination was this graph. This is how I make it. So you have a linear, a rational, a stable process. It can be a land use planning process, and usually it stays like that, but sometimes things happen in the outside world, a financial crisis or someone flying in an airplane through a large building or whatever, that everything is different, and also this planning process, it's changed by these events, and you're not controlling it as a project leader, but sometimes you find yourself leading another project. So I decided to go into that and to do as much as possible research into this topic. But then you face, and the question, the overall question was, can complexity theory, can this theory about complex systems, this theory of Prigogine, and this awareness of how those systems behave, could this help us to better understand innovative land use planning processes? And I was interested in that because I didn't read anything about it in books so far. They were still talking about linear process, this is the budget, this is the time frame, please make a plan and go on to execute the plan. So what I did then was I found some evidence of innovative processes, so I detected some plans where the results were quite unexpected and strange and new, and I thought, okay, I should go to those project leaders and those key persons and politicians to talk with them about this process, to find out what happened, what had happened, and then if you do that, so you are standing here and now, and you try to look back in a process which is already history. So the question is then how to look backward. And the thing is, if you have this innovation, if you have had this sudden change and you find yourself leading another project and you look back at that project and you tell about it, usually it's a very formal story. So you say, well, we had a plan, and well, there were some changes and we decided to change the plan, and so at the end we found the innovation. So what you do when you look backward in history, you make it a linear story. So you don't have, you make it a formal, a linear story, and you're not telling about what happened when you was there in history. So at the moment that you have to take a decision, at the moment I have to take the decision about my rooms, there were many different opportunities and I didn't know anything about them. And also planners, land use planners, sometimes when the tension, the turbulence in the surrounding, when it becomes too big, you cannot follow your planned time path anymore. But it's not so clear what is next and how you can solve the problem. So you are really looking forward, like what can I do? It's not certain. So the crux to do the research is try to get back with those people into history and then look forward with them, like what did you see, what happened, and what was the process that you were following. And one of the main methods there, well, this is an interview that I had in the harbor of Rotterdam on an iron boat with some people about different developments in education. It was all steel and there was a taxi, a water taxi bringing our food. It was a very strange situation and the thing was everyone was talking like, well, where are we? And people were telling completely different stories when you asked them about what was the role of education at the university in Wageningen. And we call this grounded theory, and it consists out of open interviews, and they can be different every time, where we focus on soft information. So as soon as people say, well, the procedure was this and this and this, okay, that's not so interesting. The interesting thing is when they say, well, I had no idea, but we tried. Or when someone starts to smile, yeah, and they say, well, they didn't expect, but then suddenly I did this, and then we managed everything. So you are searching for the moments where, for these moments where someone is really changing in a split second the whole process. And to do that, you need some more informal settings, and it gives you not the formal information, but it gives you rich information about what was really happening. But it's very difficult because people always tend to get back to the official procedures. Another thing you have to do, and this is a quite well-known cartoon, so you have to study the whole. And well, what you see here, this is a cartoon about blind researchers, and they are investigating an elephant, and well, they decided, okay, you do research on this part, and you research the other part, and you research the other part, and at the end we put all the knowledge together and we know what we are looking at. So what you see is that the one says, well, this is a wall. So this one is investigating a wall, this one is investigating some kind of spear, here someone has a snake, and there's a rope up here. So everyone is really doing a good research on part of this elephant, and at the end they bring together all the results and they say, well, this is what we are studying, and I can tell you this is not an elephant. So the interesting thing is that you should avoid to go too much into detail, try to take the whole process, but you have to make a decision always, because you cannot research the whole world every time that you are looking at a planning process.